Hey, shalom, shalom,
Shalom.
shalom lakam, which is peace unto you all. Anach Nawahai Bar Yashalai with the Hebrew Israelites coming to you week in and week out through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, the priest to you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, West Indians, Haitians, and Israelite foreigners. Nachamatam, Kaya, Hamalaka Hashemayim, Kwarab, repent ye for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. First and foremost, before we get started, we're going to give our praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rachak, Wadash. While double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone that taught us his truth and rule well. And much respect to you, bros, out there pushing his truth with our righteousness and sincere shalom, shalom.
Shalom.
So essentially before we cut on the camera, we're going into pretty much how Esau Edom has essentially covered over the faces of the judges as pursuant to Job 9:24. So could we start with that, Baba Kushar?
Nine. This is the book of Job, chapter 9, and verse 24. It reads, "The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covereth the faces of the judges thereof. If not, where and who is he?"
Mm-hmm. Says, can you run that back?
God. Job 9 and 24. "The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covereth the faces of the judges thereof. If not, where and who is he?"
So the earth, all right, who has rulership over the earth, all right, ultimately has given it to the hand of the so-called white man. Essentially he's in that rulership seat. So what he essentially constitutes is what ultimately goes on the planet Earth. All right, it says the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covereth the faces of the judges thereof. To cover ultimately goes into to conceal. Ultimately the scriptures say that he has a right hand of falsehood. So ultimately a predominant way of how he has kept his rulership, all right, which is really due to prophecy, is through his deception. The Lord essentially anointed him, or pretty much chose him for that specific position to deceive, the world. He did that by way of covering over the images. All right, the judges of the earth represent the Lord Yahweh, while his son Yahweh Shai are on down to the Israelites. All right, and essentially Esau Edom did that, to ultimately deceive. All right. Do you have
Right.
precept?
Khan, I got that for you. You wanted that Psalms 144?
Yeah, Papa Shah.
Khan, I'm going to start at verse 7. It says, "Send thine hand from above, rid me and deliver me out of great waters, from the hand of strange children,
Right, and
whose..."
those those strange children again go into Esau Edom, the so-called white man, the wicked.
Mhm. It says, "Whose mouth speak vanity, and their right hand is a right hand of falsehood."
Right, their mouths speak vanity. All right, the scriptures say, in Psalms the 73rd chapter, their tongue walketh through the earth. All right, and their tongue or that mouth ultimately represent, their mindset. Because what someone speaks is what's on their mind. So what's ultimately on the mind of the so-called white man is vanity. Things that ultimately don't amount to anything spiritually. Everything that he essentially pushes is something adverse to the scriptures. The scriptures say that essentially he was essentially made for this position. All right, and the scriptures also go into how the Most High is not in all of his thoughts. So that's ultimately what he pushes, and then what he puts on the mindset of the people as pursuant to Bon Sirach, the 10th chapter.
Khan, may I get something for you?
Mm-hmm.
This is Revelation chapter 20 and verse 7, because just backing up your point, this is this man's position. And one of his positions, as we're going to read, is to deceive the nations, to deceive the whole world, spread his lies. As we read in Job 9 and 24, right? He would cover the faces of the judges thereof. This is all part of his lies, part of that deception. So this is Revelation 20 and 7. "And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea." So when you read in the top of verse 8, it says, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth. And that's essentially what he has done. He has deceived the whole world. At this point, when you go into secular history, when you go into, a lot of the statues, a lot of the images, what has he done? He has defaced it. He has whitewashed a lot of things to where, he puts himself up as pretty much being like this, um, noble, what I'm saying, highly intelligent person. You
Mhm.
know what I'm saying? Due to his what do you call it, the uh, uh, scientific race theory and all this and that. He puts himself at in this position of being supreme, being the most intelligent, the most advanced species of human on the planet Earth. But when you really look at it, when you dig into the history and you see all his uncover some of his lies, you start to realize that this man, he's the base man spoken about in Daniel the 4th chapter in the 17th verse. He's the base man that has been set up over the earth. You see, so if this man has been allowed to rule, and deceive and lie about a lot of these things, so how much more? What more things has he lied about?
Right. Could you grab that?
Which one?
Daniel 4:17.
Okay, Khan. Yep.
While you get that, I'm gonna get this real fast. This is First Maccabees chapter 3. Or actually, you can get that first.
Khan. This is Daniel 4 and verse 17. It says, "This matter is by the decree of the watchers, and the demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over it the basest of men."
Right. And ultimately, Esau Edom, contrary to his belief, he feels as if he got that power himself. But ultimately, the Lord puts up those that are in rulership. And essentially, what Esau Edom has done with the authority over the earth, he covered over the images in the time of iconoclasm and like the Renaissance. All right, that's why we see when you see those ancient statues or the so-called wonders of the world. Essentially, the noses was broke off, because if the noses weren't broke off, you would know that essentially those was Jake's, or either Jake essentially made them. You see, because Esau Edom, he made himself appear as if he was us, and not only that, he made himself appear as the Egyptian. He made himself appear as a lot of different historical figures are in the past, but predominantly
Mhm.
us. I'm gonna get this real fast. This is First Maccabees chapter 3, and we'll get verse 48, and it says, "And laid open the book of the law." So predominantly it goes into the scriptures. It says, "And laid open the book of the law, and wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images." All right, in which that account can be found in, I believe it's Wisdom of Solomon, the first chapter. Essentially going into Caesar Borgia, how he essentially he pretty much painted himself as if he was the Lord. But reading it again, First Maccabees 3:48, "And laid open the book of the law, wherein the heathen, all right, Esau Edom, has sought to paint the likeness of their images." All right, and again, when we go into the picture of JC, they put that as if that was the Lord himself. You see, but that really was Esau Edom's counterfeit, his deception that he pushed out there.
Right, because when you look at the history, you have the Dark Ages, right? Esau was already in this impoverished state. He was out in the woods, he was out in the caves, he was out, living like a beast. So whenever he came out the caves, and starts to become civilized, and it's all due to us. What I'm saying, the Moors. Jake brought Esau out the caves and started civilizing them. So when he comes up, that spirit of being the devil, just came on. It just activated. Saying the Most High activated that spirit of being the devil and going out to deceive in him. That's the way he was programmed. So him doing the bidding of being the devil, he had to twist things up, because otherwise, how can he be in a position of power or be this the supreme people, or the God's chosen people? But then you have images of like the icons, for example. These uh, pre-Renaissance artwork that depict Jake as being the children of the Lord, the being the saints, being the angels, Yahweh Shah. So he had to remove that. This is all part of that deception and part of that plan to get on top. When you're reading the scriptures, what is it in the second Ezra? It says, trust not thine enemy. When you read letter down, or a little bit down, the next verse, I believe it says, get him not beside thee unless he take your place, roughly paraphrase.
Mhm.
That's exactly what he did. You know what I'm saying? Jay got comfortable with having Esau around, and what happened? This man ended up taking our spot.
Right. How Esau got down, in those times, he would slither his way into the coat of arms. What I mean by that is like he would marry into certain families and stuff like that to put himself up there. Kind of how you do with like Ishmael and stuff like that. A lot of them be like they be Edomites.
Yeah.
I got you got something, bro?
No, I was just going to make that point. He's more subtle than any beast of the field.
Yeah.
Subtle. He's clever. He's cunning. He's what's that word? Shrewd. When you look at these Edomites, the top bankers, they're very shrewd people, man. And
Right.
that goes back even back then. You always had I guess you could say Amalek, which is the top ruling class of the Edomites. That's just the way they get down. The Most High put a spirit on them to be like that.
Mm-hmm.
But you got it. Right?
I got this right here. This is it says color symbolism. It says color symbolism is the subjective meaning people attach to colors, which can be cultural, biological, or personal. Over time, colors have come to represent specific meanings of life events, which can be shared universally or have cultural variations. In which Esau Edom understands the study of color, and Hebrew, really how it should be. The lingua franca should be Hebrew. Ultimately, the word for color is ayan. All right, in which when you break that word down, that first letter is the I. Which goes into the I. You got the ya. All right, which that's the hand, and the hand works. All right, so then you got the na, which means continually. It's a seed. So when you put the word together, you got ayan, which it means the eye works continually. And the eye works continually to gain certain information. All right, and that information is therefore it goes into the brain. All right, and then it's processed. So Esau Edom understands how color works, and he used color symbology in his whole system. I.e., it might be a certain advertisement, and he'll make it red and other colors, to make people want to, buy stuff, or he might do certain colors in certain so-called seasons, to make people think a certain way, so this devil understands, going back into your point, how ultimately he's that cunning hunter. But I'm gonna read this again. It says color symbolism. It says color symbolism is the subjective meaning. So what it means by subjective, if something is subjective, essentially it's a shared belief in a certain group of people. So Esau Edom, again, he understands that white means good and innocent. So that's what he essentially ascribed to himself. All right. So it says again, it says subjective meaning people attach to colors, which can be cultural, biological, or personal, and which, for truth's sake, color does matter, which we ultimately don't judge ultimately, by color, but color matters for truth's sake,
Right.
So you had something, bro?
No, go ahead, bro. Go ahead, Salaki.
Could you get Ezekiel 28:14?
Mm-hmm. This is Salaki. This is Ezekiel 28 and verse 14. It says, "Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth, and I have set thee so. Thou wast upon the holy mountain of the Most High. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. Thou was perfect in thy ways from the day that thou was created till
That was
iniquity."
pretty much the point. Verse 14, it says, "Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth." Because essentially, to be anointed. Let me see. Let me get this word for anointed. All right, and it says, let me see. It says to consecrate. Pretty much, Esau Edom was consecrated. He was set apart. He was that was his specific position. To deceive. Going back to that scripture that we got, I'm gonna also get this word for covereth. And it says sakak, and it says to hedge, fence about, to shut in. Going back to what's dude name Vladimir Putin. He had they had like a little vault, and pretty much that was shut in. And then he revealed the images. The Lord put the spirit on him to essentially say, hey, the icons, they was brown. So it says to hedge, fence about, to shut in. It says to block, overshadow, and this was done by way of so-called history or his story.
Right.
Because like it was what was the group called? Magruder, McGraw Hill, the for the schools they had textbooks.
Oh yeah, yeah, McGraw. Yep.
Yeah, they pretty much when you apply this in the spirit to history, all right, they pretty much blocked. They overshadow, they screen. All right, they stopped
Mhm.
the approach, they shut off, they covered. The ultimate the information. You see, because
Mhm.
when you look at the images inside those different textbooks, and when you essentially taught those things, you're thinking that it's Edomites that did these things. You like, damn, like, well, we was just slaves or something like that. That's
Right.
pretty much that's what Esau wants you to think, because ultimately he was again anointed for that position to ultimately deceive.
Mhm. Right. One point I want to make too. You mentioned McGraw. You also had the Smithsonian. You
Hmm.
know, the Smithsonian, when they were doing the archaeological digs, they were always uh, uh like they understood what they were digging, but they would always paint the people that they would discover. They would discover some artifact or something. They'll always revert that back to Edomites. You
Right.
know, when they go digging in the Holy Land, dig up all these artifacts and stuff. They always refer that to Esau, to Edom. You
Hmm.
know, even like you said, you mentioned the like the history books and stuff like that. Sometimes they will paint it, or they will actually remove the description of that person on purpose, just to give you the mindset that everybody was white back then.
Hmm. Could you get Isaiah 28:17?
Hmm. This is this is Isaiah 28 verse 17. It says, "Judgment also will I lay to the line, and righteousness to the plummet, and the hail shall sweep away the refuge of lies, and the water shall overflow the hiding place."
Right, in which essentially, these scriptures is likened unto fire. All right, the scriptures is likened unto true food. All right, and the scriptures also likened unto the water. So the water is essentially sweeping away them lies that Esau Edom was able to hide behind. That's why he's essentially having to scramble and try to cover up things. I'm gonna get
Mhm.
this real fast. If you ain't had none,
No, go ahead.
this is 2 Corinthians 10 and verse 3. And it says, "For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war after the flesh." We're in these bodies, but ultimately, how we live, how we conduct ourselves is not after the flesh. That's Esau. That's Esau's position. He thrives, and he ultimately lives in the flesh. He's carnal. He's a carnal man. So it says, "For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war after the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through the Most High to the pulling down of strongholds." Ultimately, our spiritual power, our spiritual defense, our spiritual weapon is ultimately the spirit. We have been blessed with the spirit. So we conduct ourselves in the spirit. So it says, "For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through the Most High to the pulling down of strongholds." A stronghold, right here. Let me get this: the definition of a stronghold. All right, because we talked about subjectivity, or something that's subjective. It says stronghold. It says a castle, a stronghold, a fortress. It comes from G3794. It says anything on which one relies. A lot of people rely on the fact that Esau Edom is the people of the Lord. And I say air quotes, but it says anything on which one relies. It says, of the arguments and reasonings by which a disputant endeavors to fortify his opinion and defend it against his opponent. And being that he has been given the position to deceive, a lot of people are under the false impression that ultimately he's white. He's a good person. He cares about your well-being. All right, and he's pretty much he's the best thing since sliced bread. But ultimately that's not the case. The scriptures is essentially revealing this man for what he really is, and he's the basis of men, and he's a liar and a deceiver.
Mhm. I got something for you.
Mm.
Um, Let me get this real quick. 2 Corinthians 11 and verse 14. It says, "And no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light." You got it,
Yeah.
bro.
It says, "And no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light." Pretty much, Esau Edom made himself. He made himself to appear as if he was some type of a some type of deity. Pretty much he glorified himself, and he even got everybody in the world thinking that he's such. But again, we in a time to where the Lord is revealing everything for what it truly is. This
Mhm.
water is ultimately is cleansing away, all right, them strongholds. Is sweeping it away. That sand castle, because that word we
Mhm.
got for strongholds, it said a fortress, a castle. Pretty much it's a castle on sand. So essentially
Mhm.
it's sweeping away the lies, and you seeing it for what it truly is. That's why right now we in a time to where he coming down with uh, uh, um, that great wrath, because he can't hide behind that deception. Everybody see him for what he truly is.
Right. Yeah, he's pretty much getting pinned. He's getting pinned in that corner, and
Hmm.
and Esau's going to resort to how he always resorts to. Once he can't win the word game, the mouth game, he's going to resort to that violence.
Hmm.
And that's what we see him doing right now. He's just going to resort to his basest instincts, which is bloodshed. Coming down with a sword, because ultimately he can't defeat the truth. You can't defeat the truth. You know what I'm saying? But I got something real quick. This is Isaiah 29:16. It says, "Surely your turning of things upside down shall be esteemed as the potter's clay." And that's exactly what's happening. You know, the whole, like you mentioned, how he studied and he understood the color psychology. You know what I'm saying? And he put that upon the people and the masses to pretty much break everything apart, even break up Jake. Jake over here thinking that they are different just because they're different color of skin. When really we go back to the same people. It's Esau's old scheme, divide and conquer. You know what I'm saying? The scriptures talk about how his heart is deep. You know what I'm saying? So he's done the research. He knows the psychology and how things affect people. When he labels himself white, what does that mean? It means purity, right? Innocence. When you label something black, what does it mean? Bad, evil. You know what I'm saying? So by using that, he has pretty much deceived the world into making them believe that he is the righteous. He flipped everything upside down, right? The righteous are the wicked, and the wicked are the righteous, right? This all goes back to his deception. You know that like you titled the video, right? That anointed cherub that covereth.
Hmm.
He covered everything. But like you said, now that veil is being pulled back, and now everything is being shown, man. That wash pot is being cleaned. Like you mentioned, water, right? You go in dishes and you have a wash pot full of all kinds of gunk. You can't even see the bottom of the pan. You scrub it out, and then you realize, hey, that wash pot is a different color. You know
Right.
what you got?
Con. Um. Let's get Let's get this. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 2 and verse 15. It says, "But he that is spiritual judgeth all things, yet he himself is judged of no man." And ultimately, Esau Edom, going back to 2 Corinthians, the 10th chapter, scriptures say that, that scripture went into how we don't war after the flesh. Esau Edom didn't really consider the fact of the spirit, essentially going out the four corners of the globe, you see, because he has people in the mindset that, all right, everything is just after the skin. Look at them for their skin. What is their what are their color? What is their color? Because you had a guy called his name. I think his name was Johann Blumenbach, or something like that, some of that effect. But in like the 1600s, he came out with the term uh, color. I think it was pretty much judging people off of their color and their physiological traits. But that wouldn't work. It goes back to the spirit. You can't judge what someone looks like and who they come from strictly off of what they nose look like and if they got big lips. Because they
Right.
can be a full bred Edomite, a chocolate covered Edomite. That's why it goes back to the spirit. We have to judge off of the spirit. And that's something that Esau Edom didn't consider. You know, he didn't consider the fact of prophecy. He didn't consider the fact of the water overflowing the hiding place. You know.
Uh, yeah, he didn't consider that everything that he has, all the lies that he has promoted and propagated was going to be revealed. Just imagine that. You build up all these lies, and all of a sudden, all that shit gets on your whole closet. Is open. Everything is spilling out.
Right.
All your dirty laundry is out on the floor. Everybody's seeing this shit. You know what I'm saying? And now he can't even contain it. This is the point where he can't even stand it no more. You see, but I had something real quick. Because you made mention, how you got to judge by the spirit. But this is Romans 8:16. The spirit itself bear witness with our spirit that we are the children of the Most High. And I'm bringing this out because, like you mentioned, you got to judge by the spirit. You can't. It's not as easy as saying, oh, that guy looks white, so he's an Edomite. No, what I'm saying, we can't go by that because when you read the scriptures, Jake is scattered throughout all the four corners of the earth. Jacob went into multiple captivities. You have Jake that's in Asia, or China, Jake in Japan, Jake in Africa. What I'm saying, it's not based off color. Even in this, if I may get this real quick,
Mhm.
this is Hosea 7:8. Ephraim, he hath mixed himself among the people. Ephraim is a cake not turned. So if we go based off the logic you know, of colorism, and that all Israelites are so-called black, or all Edomites are so-called white. You're gonna exclude some Israelites from being saved, and you're gonna uh, uh, um yeah, pretty much you're gonna exclude some Israelites from being saved because you're gonna just pin it on just color, and that's not
Right.
the case. The Most High ain't dealing with that. But you got it.
Can we get Revelation chapter 1, and you can start at verse 2. We just get verse 2, and then we'll skip down to verse 13.
Uh, this is Revelation chapter 1. It says in verse 1. You said verse 1, right?
Verse 2.
Oh, verse 2. So like it. This is Revelation 1 and 2. It says, "Who bear record of the word of the Most High, and of the testimony of Yahweh Shah Hamashiach, and of all things that he saw."
Right. I'm gonna get in the NLT, and it says, "Who faithfully reported everything he saw. This is his report of the word of the Most High and the testimony of Yahweh Shai Hamashiach." So it's like when they used to have those I think, what was it called, Law and Order SVU, or you might have had like an actual, like literally like in our present world, how they, it might be in court, and they'd be reading off the court docket, and they'd be like, oh well, this is the witness, this is what he saw, this is what actually happened, so this is what's going on right here. It says Revelation 1 and 2, who faithfully reported everything he saw. This is his report of the word of the Most High and the testimony of Yahweh Shai Hamashayach. So this is a detailed and accurate synopsis as to who the Lord is and what he looks like.
Mhm.
So skipping down to 13.
Fine. I'll read
We
it.
start at 12.
Okay, fine. This is Revelation 1 and 12. "And I turned to see the voice that spake with me, and being turned, I saw 7 golden candlesticks. In the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man,
Mm-hmm.
clothed with a garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle."
Right, it's talking about the Lord Yahweh Shai.
Mhm. Verse 14, "His head and his hairs were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire."
Right. So it says his head and his hairs were white like wool. All right, because ultimately, when you go into wool, that's talking about the actual texture.
Mhm.
Wool is the texture of the hair. If you look at a so-called Judite, or excuse me, a Judite, or a so-called black man, their hair, the texture is like wool. That's why back in those the country westerns, or you might see the old films. They say, hey, they say Snowball. You might see Django. Django was like, "Hey, Snowball, you want to know my name or the name of my horse?" Because Snowball is a term ascribed to those that have the white woolly hair. I'm gonna get another
Right.
precept. This is Psalms chapter 147, and we'll get verse 17, 16. It says, "He giveth snow." I'm gonna start from verse 15. Psalms 147 and 15. "He sendeth forth his commandment upon earth; his word runneth very swiftly. He giveth snow like wool; he scattereth the hoarfrost like ashes." So snow is comparable to wool. If you actually if you picked up a snowball, well, it looked like the hair of older jakes. And the snow ultimately it has that whitish color, and it looks like, again, that the texture. It looks like the texture of wool.
Hmm.
And actually, I'm gonna go into this word for snow. Give me a second.
Hmm.
Curious what it says. And actually, I want to get that word for like wool. All right, because reading it back, Psalms 147 and 16, he giveth snow like wool, he scattered the hoarfrost like ashes. Now let's get this word for wool. And it says Tazamar, H6785. And it says uh, root, from an unused root, probably meaning to be shaggy, which it goes into that. It says outline of biblical usage: wool, whiteness metaphorically. It says wool and garments. All right, now I'm gonna skip down. It says tazamar, and it says wool from its being shorn off. Because the word, let me see, going back, it says from the meaning to mean shaggy, because it has something to do with how the trees look. But long story short, pretty much Tazamar is, it said like wool because pretty much wool is shaggy. Again, going into the texture of how a Judite's hair would look. So
Hmm.
going back, Revelation chapter 1 and
14.
yeah, 14.
God. It says, his head and his hairs were white like wool, as white as snow,
Hmm.
and his eyes were as a flame of fire.
Right. So it says his hairs were white like wool, talking about the texture, and it says as white as snow. When it says as white as snow, it's talking about the color of it. And the scriptures say, those that have, the white colored hair, it shows wisdom. So the Lord is all wisdom. So it says,
Um,
and his eyes were as a flame of fire. And it says, verse 15, and his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burn in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters. All right, so going back from the top, it says, and his feet like unto fine brass, and brass by itself is a brownish color. It says,
mhm.
as if they burned in a furnace. If you burn anything, it's going to be very, very dark, and you got a lot of people that try to dance around, what it's talking about. They say, oh, it'll be an olive color. Well, what color is an olive? Well, it look green, You got people that say that, but if you burn brass in a furnace, it's going to be very, very dark, so the Lord is very, very melanated. So it
Right.
says,
Salakia. And if I
mm-hmm,
if I may add just real quick,
mm-hmm,
that word there is actually should be bronze. So
mm-hmm,
when you go into bronze, what the color of bronze looks, it's already brown. And to
mm-hmm,
burn that even more, that's a dark ass Judite, man.
right.
But you got that.
God. It says, and his voice as the sound of many waters. So, and that's one of the reasons that a lot of times they try to demasculate Jake, because Jake essentially on a lower level, come in the the color and the austereness of our Lord,
Mhm.
in a small faction, because it says, and his voice as the sound of many waters. When you see it'll be the older Jakes, at the job, and they have that real deep voice, and they speak very, very stern. And a lot of times, Esau Edom will try to demonize them and get them up off the job, but really that's on a smaller faction. That's the appearance of the Lord, that austereness,
Right. They're scared of that.
right. It says, and his voice is the sound of many waters. When it says the many waters, if you picture, if you was out at sea, you on a even if you at the beach, when you go into the Hebrew word for sea, it's yam. All right, the yam means to work. The ma is water, so working water. When water is working, it's a lot of roaring. If you at sea, you're moving, and then you could hear the water rushing. So
Mhm.
pretty much it's likened to like a present day example. If you was at a basketball game, and you walk on that floor and you hear all those voices. It has a vibration. It has a heavy vibration. So pretty much painting the picture, illustrating the picture that the Lord is very austere in how he talks, how he speaks. It's a vibration which you can feel.
Mhm.
That's pretty much all I had, bro. If you got nothing.
I got something real quick I wanted to add to this because you mentioned well in this whole lesson we've been going into how Esau has used color psychology, to deceive the world, but also to deceive Jake,
Hmm.
to pretty much bring the curses upon us, and make us divided. But
Right.
this is Deuteronomy 30 and verse 1. It says, "And it shall come to pass when all these things are come upon thee, the blessing and the curse which I have set before thee, and thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations." How is this happening? By the way of the prophets, right? By the way of speaking on the highways and byways through these videos. That's how this word is being disseminated. But it says, "Whither the Lord Yahweh hath driven thee, and shall return unto the Lord thy power, and shall obey his voice according to all that I have commanded thee this day, thou and thy children with all thine heart and with all thy soul, that then the Lord Yahweh thy power will turn thy captivity and have compassion upon thee, and will return and gather thee from all the nations whither the Lord Yahweh thy power has scattered thee." So from all the nations of the earth, right? So that means that Jake, if I mean, to be realistic, like Jake is gonna, get married. Jake is gonna have sex. Jake is gonna have children, and they're gonna choose the wives of the nations too, man. I mean, not that. I mean, not I'm not saying that Jake should have wives of the nations, but I'm saying like they had concubines. You know what I'm saying? But my point is that they had children of these other nations, and those children were Israelites. And just think about a couple generations. All it takes is like 2 or 3 generations for uh, uh the appearance of their children to change if you're intermarrying with these other nations, right? But it says, verse 4, "If any of thine be driven out into the outmost parts of heaven, from thence will the Lord thy power gather thee, and from thence will he fetch thee, and the Lord thy power will bring thee into the land which thy fathers possessed, and thou shalt possess it, and he will do thee good and multiply thee above thy fathers." So the point being is that Jake, no matter where Jake is, they're going to be brought back. And this got nothing to do with how they look. It's all based off the spirit. So and 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 just touching on that real quick, on what is it, Ezekiel the 37th chapter. Um
Going into.
where it's at, where it talks about how the envy of Judah, and oh wait, that's in Isaiah, Salaki. Let me get it real quick. It's Isaiah 11 and verse 12. I'll read it right here. It says, "And he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the 4 corners of the earth. The envy also of Ephraim shall depart, and the adversaries of Judah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not envy Judah, and Judah shall not envy, or Judah shall not vex Ephraim." So this whole color psychology, the way Esau has been able to divide us, since the truth is out, we see in the elect come together, man. All this is starting with the elect. That whole color psychology has been a stronghold, has been pretty much like a like a bond that's been on Jake's minds to keep us separated. But like we like like we mentioned, the spirit, man, it's all about the spirit, and the spirit is making us come back together. To where these this this shit that Esau has done to our people, the warping of our minds is being undone. This is where the healing starts. That's in what, Hosea 6:1, 6:2, right? The Most High is bringing that healing back unto us, and that's by the way of this truth. Dismantling Esau's lies, what I'm saying? This whole deception. Now we know who the devil is. You know, the white man being the wicked, you know, and us being the righteous. For as long as for as long as I can remember, you know, Esau has been painting Jake as being the villain, being the antagonist, being the bad guy, being the criminal, you know, the drug kingpin on the street, on the corner of the street, you know what I'm saying? But now we understand, you know, who's really who, right? But that's pretty much it. I don't know if you have anything.
I got one more, and that'll be it. This is Ephesians chapter 2, and we'll get verse 14. Just laying back on your point. It says verse 13. It says verse 12. It says Ephesians 2 and 12, that at that time ye were without Hamashayach, being aliens from the commonwealth of Yashar Allah, and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without the Most High in the world. All right, because pretty much what we are today was a foreshadowing of how Jake was, in the four corners of the globe as the Israelite foreigners. Because pretty much, we come in that same steed, present day. So it says,
Mhm.
but now in Hamashayach Yahawashai, ye who sometimes were far off are made nigh by the blood of Hamashayach. For he is our peace, who hath made both one and hath broken down the middle wall of partition between us. And that middle wall of partition goes into, pretty much that division between the tribes, and one part of that, that Esau Edom played on was the color symbology. You know, it says,
Mhm.
and hath broken down the middle wall of partition between us, having abolished in his flesh the enmity, even the law of commandments contained in ordinances, for to make in himself of twain one new man, so making peace. Because Jake, going back to the curses, Jake is plagued by the curses, just by default against each other, But
Mhm.
it says, and that he might reconcile both unto the Most High in one body by the cross, having slain the enmity thereby, and came and preached peace to you which were afar off, and to them that were nigh. For through him we both have access by one Spirit unto the Father. So ultimately, it's the Lord Yahweh Shai Hamashayach, that gathered, the elect first and foremost on this side. You see, because how we came up was essentially to be against our brother, but that's not, how it should be. It's just
Mhm.
the curses in which the curses will be fully removed, in the kingdom.
That's right.
But that's pretty much all I had, bro.
Likewise.
Conway, hey, I don't want to Zaza about Naya Palos, that was a beautiful edification to the spirit. While I don't want to Zaza Adam Yashi, I want to Wab, Lord as well. You'll have a good day. Well, we can go ahead and close it out by saying, Call her light and law. Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Racha Hakodash, while double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone that touched this truth and rule well. And much respect to you, bros, out there pushing this truth with all righteousness and sincere. Shalom, shalom.
Wow.